Nicole Bennett scanned another item across the barcode reader at her checkout lane at the Kroger supermarket in Littleton, Colorado, a southern suburb of Denver. The familiar beep of the scanner, the mechanical sound of items sliding down the conveyor belt, the repetitive motion of reaching, scanning, bagging, these were the rhythms that had defined her work life for the past 7 years. At 31 years old, Nicole had been working as a cashier at this particular Kroger location since she was 24, right after she'd graduated from community college with an associate degree in business administration that she'd never quite figured out how to parlay into a better job. The work was monotonous but stable. Nicole worked the day shift, Tuesday through Saturday from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., which gave her evenings free to spend with her 8-year-old daughter Emma. The pay wasn't great, $16.50 an hour after 7 years of small annual raises, but it covered rent on their modest 2-bedroom apartment, kept food on the table, and provided health insurance that was adequate if not generous. Nicole had long ago made peace with the reality that this job, which she'd originally seen as temporary, had become permanent. She was good at it. Customers liked her friendly efficiency, management appreciated her reliability, and in an uncertain economy, job security mattered more than career ambition. Over 7 years of scanning groceries, Nicole had developed a kind of unconscious cataloging system in her mind. She knew the regular customers by sight, if not always by name. The elderly man who came in every Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. to buy a rotisserie chicken and the day's newspaper. The young mother with 3 kids under 5 who shopped on Wednesday afternoons and always looked exhausted. The businessman who stopped by after work on Thursdays to grab pre-made salads and energy drinks. The college student who came in late on Saturday afternoons to buy instant ramen and frozen pizza on a clearly limited budget. Nicole had scanned millions of items over 7 years: produce, canned goods, frozen foods, cleaning products, personal care items, baby supplies, pet food, bakery items, deli meats, dairy products. She could estimate the total cost of a cart of groceries with startling accuracy just by glancing at the items. She knew which products were currently on sale without looking at the system. She could pack bags efficiently, grouping cold items together, keeping chemicals separate from food, being gentle with bread and eggs. The job had become so automatic that Nicole's hands could do the work while her mind wandered, thinking about what to make for dinner, whether Emma needed new shoes for school, if the check engine light in her car meant expensive repairs she couldn't afford. But even in the automaticity of the work, Nicole noticed things. She noticed when regular customers changed their buying patterns: the beer drinker who suddenly switched to sparkling water, the meat eater who started buying vegetarian products, the name brand loyalist who shifted to generic store brands, usually signaling a tightening budget. She noticed customers who seemed upset or stressed, who snapped at their children or talked on their phones in frustrated tones. She noticed the occasional shoplifter, though store policy was to alert management rather than confront suspected thieves directly. She noticed pregnant women, newlyweds with their matching rings and coordinated shopping lists, elderly people who moved slowly and sometimes needed help getting items onto the conveyor belt. After 7 years, Nicole prided herself on being observant, on providing good customer service that went beyond just scanning items efficiently. She made eye contact, smiled genuinely, asked "How are you today?" and actually listened to the answer. She complimented customers' children, commented on interesting food choices, made small talk about the weather or local events. She helped elderly customers carry bags to their cars when she could. She gave stickers to kids and dog treats to pets. These small human connections made the repetitive work feel more meaningful, made Nicole feel like she was part of the community rather than just a cog in a corporate retail machine. It was this habit of observation, this attention to patterns and details, that made Nicole notice the woman who would change everything about how she understood her role as a grocery store cashier. The first time Nicole noticed the woman, it was a Tuesday morning in early March, around 10:30 a.m. during a relatively slow period between the early morning rush and the lunchtime shoppers. The woman approached Nicole's checkout lane with a cart containing 12 cans of Similac baby formula, the large 36-ounce containers that cost about $35 each, nothing else, just the 12 cans of formula. Nicole began scanning the items, noting the substantial total accumulating on her register screen. 12 cans at $35 each meant this woman was spending over $400 on baby formula alone. That was unusual but not unheard of. Sometimes parents stocked up when formula went on sale or bought in bulk for twins or multiple children in daycare settings. What made Nicole pay closer attention was the woman herself. She appeared to be in her mid-20s, with pale skin that had an unhealthy greyish cast to it, as if she didn't spend much time outdoors or wasn't eating well. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, unwashed and limp. She wore jeans and an oversized sweatshirt, despite the mild March weather, clothes that looked slept in. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and she had the exhausted, hollow-eyed look of someone who wasn't sleeping. Most notably, she looked frightened. Her eyes darted around the store nervously, her hands trembled slightly as she pulled cash out of a worn wallet, and she flinched when a shopping cart rattled loudly in an adjacent aisle. "Wow, that's a lot of formula," Nicole said with a friendly smile as she scanned the cans. "You must have a hungry baby at home." The woman didn't smile back or engage with Nicole's friendly comment. She just nodded slightly and kept glancing over her shoulder as if checking to see if someone was watching her. "Your total is $418.32, Nicole said, completing the transaction. The woman handed over a thick stack of $20 bills, all crumpled and worn, the kind of cash that looked like it had passed through many hands. She counted out 21 20s, declined a receipt, loaded the cans back into her cart, and hurried out of the store without making eye contact or responding to Nicole's "Have a great day." Nicole watched the woman leave, a vague sense of unease settling in her chest. Something about that transaction felt off, though she couldn't articulate exactly what. The quantity of formula wasn't unusual in itself. Paying in cash wasn't strange. Plenty of people preferred cash. But the woman's demeanor, the fear, the nervousness, the refusal to engage in normal social niceties, the way she'd hurried out as if escaping, that bothered Nicole. Nicole pushed the feeling aside and moved on to the next customer, then the next. The steady flow of Tuesday morning shoppers, keeping her busy enough that she didn't dwell on the odd interaction. But the image of that frightened woman with her cart full of formula lingered in the back of Nicole's mind. 3 days later, on Friday afternoon, the same woman came through Nicole's checkout lane again. This time she had 8 cans of formula, a different brand, Enfamil, instead of Similac, but again, nothing else, just the formula. Again she paid in cash. Again she looked terrified and exhausted. Again she refused to make eye contact or engage in conversation. And again she hurried out of the store as soon as the transaction was complete. Nicole definitely noticed this time. 2 visits in less than a week, both times buying only baby formula in large quantities, both times paying in cash, both times displaying the same frightened, furtive behavior. Nicole pulled up the transaction history on her register after the woman left, noting the amounts and times, starting to create a mental file on this unusual customer. Over the next 6 weeks, the pattern repeated with disturbing regularity. The woman came in every 3 to 4 days, always during Nicole's shift, whether by coincidence or because someone was deliberately sending her during those hours. Nicole couldn't determine. Each time, she purchased between 6 and 12 cans of baby formula, always paying in cash, always buying nothing else, and always exhibiting the same frightened, nervous demeanor. Nicole began tracking these visits more deliberately, jotting down dates and quantities in a small notebook she kept in her locker. March 5, 12 cans, Similac, $400. March 8, 8 cans, Enfamil, $372. March 12, 10 cans, Similac, $320. March 33, March $30. March 30, 12 cans, Enfamil, $326. March 19, 6 cans, Similac, 2010. March 23, 10 cans, Enfamil, $330. March 26, 8 cans, Similac, 2080. March 30, 12 cans, Enfamil, $326. March $30. March 30, March 4, 12 cans, Enfamil, $300. 12. Each $20. Pultov Talev, 12 cans, Oftala, 12 cans, Oftala, 12 cans, Tiger Oftala. March 30, Pultov Tala, 12 cans, Pultov Tala. March 4, Oftala, Pultov Tala, Pultov Tala, Pultov Tala, Pultov Tala, Pultov Tala, Pultov Tala. By the end of March, Nicole calculated that this woman had spent over $2,600 on baby formula over the course of 8 visits to the store. That was an extraordinary amount. Even parents of twins or triplets didn't go through formula that quickly. And every single time, the woman bought only formula, never diapers, never baby wipes, never baby food or bottles, or any of the thousands of other items that parents of infants routinely purchased, just formula. Nicole started paying closer attention to the woman during each visit, trying to gather more information about what might be happening. She noticed that the woman always had visible bruises, sometimes on her arms when her sleeves rode up, once a fading bruise on her cheekbone that she'd tried to cover with makeup, another time what looked like finger marks on her wrist. She noticed that the woman's clothes were always the same few items rotated, the same 2 pairs of jeans, the same 3 oversized sweatshirts, the same worn sneakers. She noticed that the woman never made phone calls or checked a phone while in the store, which was unusual for someone in their 20s in 2024. She noticed that the woman always paid with small bills, 10s and 20s, never 50s or 100s, suggesting she was being given specific amounts of cash for these transactions rather than drawing from her own bank account. Most disturbing, Nicole noticed that the woman seemed to be deteriorating physically over the 6 weeks. She was losing weight, her already pale skin becoming more sallow and unhealthy looking. The dark circles under her eyes deepened. She moved more slowly, as if in pain or exhausted. She looked like someone who was being physically and mentally broken down by circumstances Nicole could only guess at. Nicole tried several times to engage the woman in conversation, hoping to gather more information or offer help if help was needed. "How old is your baby?" Nicole asked during one transaction in late March. The woman's eyes filled with sudden tears, and she looked away without answering. "Are you okay?" Nicole asked another time, seeing bruises on the woman's arms. The woman pulled her sleeves down and shook her head, not in answer but in a gesture that clearly meant don't ask. "Is there anything I can help you with?" Nicole tried during another visit. The woman whispered no so quietly Nicole almost didn't hear it, then hurried out of the store even more quickly than usual. Nicole's concern was growing into genuine alarm. Something was very wrong with this situation, but she didn't know what exactly or what she could do about it. The woman was clearly in distress, but she wasn't asking for help and seemed afraid to talk. The baby formula purchases were bizarre in their volume and singular focus, but buying large quantities of a legal product wasn't a crime. The bruises suggested abuse, but the woman was an adult who could theoretically leave an abusive situation if she chose to, and Nicole had no way to know the circumstances. Nicole confided in her co-worker and friend Maria Gonzalez, who worked at the customer service desk. "Maria, there's this woman who's been coming in every few days for the past 6 weeks, buying huge amounts of baby formula and nothing else. She always looks terrified and has bruises. Something is really wrong, but I don't know what to do about it." Maria, who'd worked at Kroger for 15 years and had seen plenty of unusual customer behavior, thought for a moment. That is weird. Baby formula is expensive. If she's buying that much, she's spending thousands of dollars. Why not just buy diapers or wipes or anything else babies need? And why always cash? "Exactly," Nicole said. "It doesn't make sense, and she won't talk to me or make eye contact. She just pays and leaves as fast as possible." "Have you told management?" Maria asked. "Not yet. I mean, what would I even say? A customer is buying a lot of baby formula, and I have a bad feeling about it. That seems like I'm just being paranoid or nosy." Maria shrugged. "Maybe, or maybe your instincts are telling you something is wrong and you should listen. We get training about recognizing suspicious activity, money laundering, credit card fraud, organized retail theft. This could be something like that." Nicole decided to do some research before escalating her concerns to management. That evening, after Emma was in bed, Nicole sat at her laptop Googling large quantities baby formula and why do people buy baby formula in bulk. What she found made her blood run cold. Multiple articles and law enforcement bulletins explained that baby formula was frequently stolen or illegally purchased for resale on the black market because it was expensive, had a long shelf life, was always in demand, and could be sold for significant profit. Organized retail theft rings specifically targeted baby formula, stealing it from stores or sending people to buy it with stolen credit cards, then reselling it through online marketplaces or small stores. But more disturbing were the articles Nicole found about human trafficking operations using baby formula as a commodity. Traffickers forced victims to purchase baby formula with cash provided by the trafficking organization. Then the formula was resold for profit. The cash purchases avoided credit card trails. The victims were often women being held against their will, forced into prostitution or labor trafficking, and made to perform tasks like purchasing goods for resale as part of their exploitation. The traffickers controlled the victims through violence, threats, debt bondage, confiscation of identification documents, and isolation. Nicole felt sick as she read through these articles. The frightened woman buying formula every few days, always in cash, always alone, always with bruises, looking like she was being destroyed physically and mentally. She fit the profile of a trafficking victim perfectly, and Nicole had been watching this happen for 6 weeks without fully understanding what she was seeing. The next time the woman came into the store, April 12th, a Tuesday morning, Nicole was ready. She'd decided she had to act, had to try to help, even if she was wrong about what was happening. When the woman approached Nicole's checkout lane with 10 cans of formula, Nicole scanned the items, but then did something she'd never done before. She leaned forward and spoke very quietly, making sure no other customers or employees could hear. "Ma'am, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Do you actually have a baby?" The woman's eyes widened in shock and fear. For a long moment she didn't respond, just stared at Nicole like a trapped animal trying to decide whether to run. Finally she whispered, so quietly Nicole had to strain to hear, "No, I don't have a baby." "Are you being forced to buy this formula by someone?" Nicole asked, keeping her voice low and gentle. Tears spilled down the woman's cheeks and she nodded almost imperceptibly. "Are you in danger? Are you being hurt?" Another nod, more tears. "What's your name?" The woman hesitated, glancing around fearfully as if someone might be watching. Finally she whispered, "Katerina, my name is Katerina. Katerina, I want to help you, but I need you to tell me who is forcing you to do this. Where are they? Can you leave?" Katerina shook her head vigorously, panic now clear on her face. No, I cannot leave. They will kill me. They have my passport. They watch me always. I cannot." She stopped, wiping her tears, trying to compose herself. "Please, I just need to pay and go. If I take too long, they will hurt me. Please." Nicole's heart was racing. This was exactly what she'd feared. Katerina was being held by someone, forced to make these purchases, threatened with violence, unable to escape. This wasn't just abuse or theft. This was human trafficking. "Okay, I'm going to complete this transaction," Nicole said quietly. "But Katerina, I'm going to call for help. I'm going to contact police. Can you tell me where they're keeping you?" No police." Katerina looked terrified. "They will kill me if police come. They know people. They have connections. Please, just let me go. Please." Nicole completed the transaction, taking Katerina's cash and bagging the formula, but her mind was racing with how to handle this. Katerina was clearly a trafficking victim, but was too frightened to accept help or give information. If Nicole called 911 right now, Katerina would panic, and whoever was controlling her would be alerted. Nicole needed to be smart about this, needed to gather information and contact authorities in a way that would actually help Katerina, rather than putting her in more danger. "Katerina, I'm going to help you, but I'm going to do it carefully," Nicole said. "I won't call police right now if you don't want me to, but please can you tell me anything that might help? Where are you from? How did you end up here?" Katerina was loading the formula into her cart, hands shaking. "I am from Ukraine. I came to America for job. They said housekeeping job, but it was lie. They took my passport. She stopped, unable to continue, her whole body trembling. "They force you to work?" Nicole asked gently. Katerina nodded, not meeting Nicole's eyes. "Many girls, not just me. We are kept in place. We cannot leave. They make us do things, buy things, sell things, other things." Her voice broke on "other things," and Nicole understood she was referring to being forced into prostitution. "Katerina, you said they. How many people?" "I don't know. Maybe 5-6 men who work for the boss, and maybe 20 girls they keep. 20 victims. This wasn't one woman being trafficked. This was a major operation with multiple victims and multiple traffickers." Nicole felt the weight of this knowledge, the responsibility of being perhaps the only person in a position to help. "Where do they keep you?" Nicole asked. "I don't know address. Warehouse in industrial area, maybe 20 minutes from here. They bring us in van with no windows. I don't know how to get there if I run." Katerina finished loading her cart and started to walk away. Nicole called after her softly, "Katerina, when will you be back?" Katerina paused, turning back slightly. 3 days, maybe 4. They send me when they need more formula." Then she was gone, hurrying out of the store with her cart full of baby formula purchased with someone else's money for someone else's profit, a victim of trafficking forced to perform tasks for her captors. Nicole stood at her register, shaking, trying to process what had just happened. She'd been right. Katerina was a trafficking victim, and there were potentially 19 other victims being held somewhere in the Denver metro area. Nicole had to report this, had to get help, but she also had to do it in a way that wouldn't put Katerina and the other victims in danger. Nicole told her supervisor she needed to take her break immediately and went to the store's office, closing the door behind her. She pulled out her phone and searched for Denver human trafficking report. The first result was the Colorado Human Trafficking Hotline, 1-866-455-5075. Nicole dialed, her hands still shaking. A woman's voice answered, "Colorado Human Trafficking Hotline, this is Amanda. How can I help you?" Nicole took a deep breath and began explaining everything. Katerina's pattern of visits over 6 weeks, the exclusive purchase of baby formula in large quantities always paid with cash, her frightened demeanor and visible bruises, the conversation they'd just had where Katerina revealed she was from Ukraine, had been lured to the US, with false promises of legitimate work, had her passport taken, was being held with approximately 20 other women, and was being forced to purchase goods for resale, and implied she was also being forced into prostitution. Amanda listened carefully, asking clarifying questions. "You did the right thing calling this hotline. What you're describing sounds like labor and sex trafficking. The baby formula purchases are likely part of a resale scheme. Trafficking operations often force victims to purchase high-value goods for resale as a way to generate profit and launder money. The fact that there are 20 victims suggests this is an organized trafficking ring, not a single trafficker. I'm going to transfer you to the FBI's Human Trafficking Task Force. They handle large-scale operations like this. Stay on the line." Nicole was transferred to FBI agent James Rodriguez, who identified himself as part of the Denver field office's Human Trafficking Task Force. Nicole repeated her story again, this time answering even more detailed questions about Katerina's appearance, the specific dates and amounts of formula purchased, anything Katerina had said about the location where she was being held, the number of traffickers and victims, whether Katerina had mentioned names or described the people controlling her. "Ms. Bennett, what you've observed and reported is extremely valuable intelligence," Agent Rodriguez said. "Human trafficking operations are difficult to identify because they're often hidden in plain sight. Victims are forced to move through public spaces but are too frightened or controlled to ask for help. You noticed a pattern that others might have missed, and you took action. That takes courage and awareness. What happens now?" Nicole asked. Katerina said, "She'll be back in 3 or 4 days to buy more formula. She's terrified that if police get involved, the traffickers will kill her. How do we help her without putting her in more danger?" "That's exactly the right question," Rodriguez said. "Trafficking investigations require careful planning. We can't just raid a location without knowing where it is or how many victims and perpetrators are present. Doing that could result in victims being hurt or killed, or traffickers destroying evidence and fleeing. What we need to do is gather more intelligence, identify the location, identify the traffickers, and then execute a coordinated rescue operation." Agent Rodriguez explained that the FBI would open a formal investigation into this trafficking operation. They would work with Nicole to gather more information during Katerina's next visit. They would conduct surveillance to follow Katerina after she left the store to identify where she was being taken. They would research similar patterns at other stores to see if trafficking victims were making similar purchases elsewhere. They would coordinate with immigration and customs enforcement, since the victims were foreign nationals, and when they had enough intelligence, they would execute a raid to rescue the victims and arrest the traffickers. "When Katerina comes back in 3 or 4 days, here's what I need you to do," Rodriguez instructed. "Act completely normal. Process her transaction, just like you always do. Try to have a brief conversation where you ask a few specific questions. Ask if she's okay. Ask if all the women being held are from Ukraine or other countries. Ask if she knows the name of the person who brings her to the store. Don't push too hard if she can't or won't answer. The goal is to gather information without making her so nervous that the traffickers notice something is wrong. After she leaves, call me immediately at this direct number and tell me everything you learned. Then we'll have agents follow her vehicle to identify the location where she's being held." Nicole agreed to this plan, though the thought of having to wait 3 or 4 days while knowing Katerina and 19 other women were being trafficked was agonizing. But Agent Rodriguez assured her that moving too quickly without adequate intelligence could jeopardize the entire operation and put victims at greater risk. Over the next 3 days, Nicole could barely concentrate on anything else. At work, she scanned groceries mechanically while constantly watching the entrance for Katerina. At home, she was distracted and anxious. She explained to Emma in age-appropriate terms that she was helping police with something important at work but couldn't discuss details. She barely slept, replaying her conversation with Katerina, wondering if there was something more she could have said or done, worrying about what Katerina and the other victims were enduring, while Nicole waited helplessly. On the 4th day, Friday, April 5, Katerina returned. She approached Nicole's checkout lane with 12 cans of formula, the same frightened, exhausted expression, the same hollow eyes and bruised arms. Nicole's heart pounded as she began scanning the formula, knowing FBI agents were somewhere nearby, ready to follow Katerina after she left. "Hi again," Nicole said gently, keeping her voice low. "How are you doing today?" Katerina glanced up briefly, recognition in her eyes, but didn't respond verbally.
I've been thinking about you, Nicole continued, scanning cans of formula. Are you safe? Are you being treated okay? Katerina shook her head slightly. Not okay, but I am alive. The other women who are with you, are they all from Ukraine like you? No, different countries. Ukraine, Moldova, Romania, Russia, some from Asia also, all brought here with false promises. Nicole kept scanning, trying to appear casual, while gathering critical intelligence. When they bring you here to the store, is it the same person every time? Usually yes. Man named Dmitry. He drives van. He waits in parking lot while I shop. If I take too long, he comes inside to find me. He watches always. Nicole's chest tightened. Dmitry was in the parking lot right now, watching, which meant FBI agents would soon be following him back to wherever the victims were being held. Your total is $418, Nicole said, completing the transaction. Katerina handed over the cash, the same worn bills in stacks of 20s, and Nicole gave her change and a receipt. As Katerina was loading the formula into her cart, Nicole took a risk. She reached out and briefly touched Katerina's hand. Help is coming, she whispered. Soon. Be ready. Katerina's eyes widened with a mixture of hope and terror. She nodded almost imperceptibly, then hurried out of the store with her cart full of formula. Nicole immediately went to the store's office and called Agent Rodriguez's direct number. She was just here. She said the other victims are from multiple countries: Ukraine, Moldova, Romania, Russia, and some Asian countries. She said a man named Dmitry drives a van and waits in the parking lot while she shops. She said he watches her constantly. She just left maybe 2 minutes ago. Perfect, Rodriguez said. We have agents in position. We're following the van now. Keep your phone nearby. I'll call you with updates. Nicole went back to her register and tried to focus on the steady stream of Friday afternoon customers, but her mind was entirely on Katerina and what was happening in the investigation. Were FBI agents following the van? Had they identified the location? Would they be able to rescue all 20 victims safely? 3 hours later, as Nicole's shift was ending at 3 p.m., her phone buzzed with a call from Agent Rodriguez. Bennett, I wanted to update you. We successfully followed the van to a warehouse in an industrial area of Aurora, about 25 minutes from your store. We've confirmed there are multiple individuals at the location. We're planning to execute a rescue operation tomorrow morning at 6 a.m., when we'll have maximum personnel available, and the traffickers will likely be less alert. I wanted to thank you again for your vigilance and cooperation. Your observations led us directly to these victims. Will Katerina be okay? Nicole asked. Will all of them be safe? That's always our top priority in these operations, Rodriguez assured her. We'll have medical personnel on site, trauma counselors, interpreters, and immigration specialists. The victims will be taken to a safe location, provided with medical care and counseling, and given the option to cooperate with prosecution of their traffickers. This isn't just an arrest operation. It's a comprehensive victim rescue and support operation.
Nicole could barely sleep that night, thinking about the raid that would happen at 6 a.m. She woke at 5:30 a.m. and sat with her phone waiting for news. At 7:15 a.m., Agent Rodriguez called. The operation was successful, he said, and Nicole felt tears of relief spring to her eyes. We executed a coordinated raid at 6:02 a.m. We rescued 23 victims, more than we initially thought were being held. All are female, ranging in age from 19 to 34, from 6 different countries. We arrested 7 individuals at the scene on charges of human trafficking, forced labor, and related offenses. All the victims are safe and are receiving medical care and support. What happens to them now? Nicole asked. They'll be interviewed by investigators, provided with medical care and trauma counseling, and given T visas which allow trafficking victims to remain in the U.S. temporarily while cooperating with prosecution. They'll have access to housing assistance, job training, and long-term support services. Many trafficking victims eventually receive permanent residency. The important thing is they're free now, they're safe, and the people who trafficked them will be prosecuted. Agent Rodriguez explained that the investigation would continue as they built cases against the traffickers and worked to identify whether this operation was connected to larger trafficking networks. He said Nicole would likely be asked to testify about her observations of Katerina's suspicious purchasing patterns, and he emphasized again that Nicole's vigilance and willingness to report her concerns had directly resulted in rescuing 23 women from trafficking. Over the next several weeks, Nicole learned more details about the trafficking operation she'd helped expose. The FBI's investigation revealed that the trafficking ring was run by a Ukrainian organized crime group that had been operating in the Denver area for approximately 3 years. They recruited women from economically struggling areas of Eastern Europe and Central Asia with false advertisements for legitimate jobs in the United States: housekeepers, nannies, waitresses, hotel workers. Once the women arrived, their passports were confiscated. They were told they owed tens of thousands of dollars for their transportation and must work to pay off the debt, and they were forced into prostitution and labor exploitation. The warehouse where the women were held served multiple purposes. It was a base for prostitution operations, with clients brought to the warehouse or victims transported to hotels for sex trafficking. It was also a base for organized retail theft and resale operations. The traffickers sent victims to stores across the metro area to purchase high-value goods like baby formula, over-the-counter medications, razor blades and cosmetics, items that were expensive, had long shelf lives and could be easily resold. The victims used cash provided by the traffickers to avoid credit card trails. The purchased goods were then resold through online marketplaces and small stores, generating hundreds of thousands of dollars in profit annually. Katerina, the woman Nicole had noticed, had been trafficked specifically for these purchasing operations because her English was better than some of the other victims and she could navigate stores and transactions without drawing as much attention. But like all the victims, she was also forced into prostitution and subjected to violence to ensure compliance. She'd been held for 14 months before Nicole's intervention led to her rescue. The 7 individuals arrested during the raid, 5 men and 2 women, all Ukrainian or Russian nationals, were charged with dozens of federal crimes: sex trafficking, forced labor, harboring undocumented aliens, money laundering, organized retail theft, conspiracy, and multiple counts of assault and false imprisonment. The lead trafficker, a man named Viktor Kozlov, age 38, faced more than 100 years in federal prison if convicted on all counts. Nicole was asked to testify during the trial about her observations of Katerina's suspicious purchasing patterns. She explained how she'd noticed Katerina coming in every few days for 6 weeks, always buying large quantities of baby formula and nothing else, always paying in cash, always looking frightened and injured. She described their conversation where Katerina had admitted she didn't have a baby and was being forced to make the purchases. She described her decision to call the human trafficking hotline and cooperate with the FBI investigation. "Why did you pay such close attention to this particular customer?" the prosecutor asked during Nicole's testimony. "You must see thousands of customers every week. What made you notice Katerina specifically?" Nicole thought carefully about her answer. "I've been a cashier for 7 years. After that long, you develop a sense for what's normal and what isn't. When I see someone buying large quantities of an expensive item like baby formula, I automatically notice because it's unusual. But what really caught my attention was that Katerina only bought formula, never diapers, never baby wipes, never baby food, never any of the hundreds of other things parents with infants buy. That didn't make sense. And then there was her demeanor. She looked terrified every single time she came in. She had visible bruises. She wouldn't make eye contact or engage in conversation. She paid in small bills like someone had given her exact change. She rushed out of the store like she was being timed. All of those things together told me something was very wrong," the prosecutor continued. "And what made you decide to actually speak to her about your concerns rather than just observing? After 6 weeks of watching this pattern, I couldn't stay silent anymore," Nicole said. "I kept thinking about what might be happening to this woman. The bruises got worse. She looked like she was deteriorating physically. I researched online and learned that baby formula is used in trafficking and theft operations. I realized I might be watching a trafficking victim asking for help in the only way she could, by repeatedly showing up in public where someone might notice. So I had to try. I asked her if she actually had a baby, and when she said no and started crying, I knew I'd been right to be concerned." Nicole's testimony was powerful because she was a neutral third-party observer with no connection to the victims or perpetrators, and because her detailed documentation of Katerina's purchasing patterns over 6 weeks provided concrete evidence of the trafficking operation's systematic nature. The defense attorneys tried to suggest Nicole had misinterpreted innocent behavior or jumped to conclusions, but Nicole's calm, detailed recounting of specific dates, amounts, and observations was difficult to refute. Katerina also testified, describing through an interpreter how she'd been recruited in Ukraine with promises of legitimate housekeeping work in America, how she'd paid a recruitment fee that put her in debt, how she'd been met at the airport by members of the trafficking ring who immediately confiscated her passport and told her she now owed $50,000 for her transportation and documents, how she'd been taken to the warehouse and told she would work as a prostitute and perform other tasks until her debt was paid. She described 14 months of captivity, during which she was forced to have sex with multiple men every day, beaten when she resisted or didn't earn enough money, given minimal food and no medical care, and periodically taken to stores to purchase goods for resale. She described being driven to Kroger every few days by a trafficker named Dmitri, being given specific instructions about what to buy and how much to spend, and being told she had exactly 20 minutes to complete the purchase, or she would be punished. I wanted to ask for help, but I was too afraid, Katerina testified, tears streaming down her face. They said if I spoke to police, they would kill me and kill my family in Ukraine. They said they had connections everywhere, that police could not help me. I felt hopeless. But then the cashier Nicole, she noticed me. After many weeks, she asked if I really had a baby. I was so surprised that someone had noticed, that someone cared enough to ask questions. When I told her I needed help, she promised to help me carefully. A few days later, FBI came and rescued all of us. Nicole saved my life and lives of 22 other women. If she had not noticed, we would still be there. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The evidence was overwhelming. Testimony from all 23 victims, financial records showing the money laundering operation, surveillance footage from stores showing victims making repetitive purchases, phone records and text messages coordinating the trafficking activities, physical evidence from the warehouse including weapons, false identification documents, and records tracking victims' supposed debts. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts for all 7 defendants. Viktor Kozlov, the ringleader, was sentenced to life in federal prison without possibility of parole. The other 6 defendants received sentences ranging from 25 to 45 years. All were ordered to pay restitution to their victims, though the likelihood of collecting significant money from imprisoned traffickers was minimal. More importantly, all 23 victims were free, safe, and beginning the long process of healing from their trauma. Nicole attended the sentencing hearing, sitting in the gallery and watching as the judge condemned the traffickers' actions and handed down the lengthy sentences. After the hearing, Katerina approached Nicole in the courthouse hallway, accompanied by a victim advocate. "I want to thank you," Katerina said, her English having improved significantly in the 3 months since her rescue. "You saw me when I felt invisible. You noticed when I thought no one would ever notice. You cared when I thought no one cared. Because of you, I am free. Because of you, I am alive. I will never forget what you did for me." Nicole hugged Katerina, both women crying. "I'm so glad you're safe. I'm so sorry for what you went through. But you're free now. You can build a new life." Katerina nodded. "I am working with immigration attorney to get permanent residency. I am learning English and going to community college. I want to work with organizations that help trafficking victims, to help other women like me. I want to use what happened to me to help others." Over the following months, Nicole learned about the recovery journeys of the 23 women who'd been rescued. All had been granted T visas, allowing them to remain in the United States while cooperating with the prosecution. They received comprehensive support services, including housing assistance, medical care, trauma counseling, legal advocacy, English language instruction, and job training. Some of the women chose to return to their home countries after the trial, wanting to reunite with families they hadn't seen in years. Others chose to stay in the United States, building new lives in a country that had first represented exploitation and captivity, but now represented freedom and opportunity. Several enrolled in community colleges or vocational training programs. A few found jobs in restaurants, hotels, or healthcare facilities. All worked with therapists to process the trauma of trafficking and begin rebuilding their sense of self-worth and agency. Katerina remained in Denver and became particularly close with Nicole, visiting her periodically at the Kroger where Nicole still worked. Each visit reminded Nicole of how different Katerina looked now compared to those 6 weeks when she'd been buying baby formula as a captive trafficking victim. The hollow-eyed, bruised, terrified woman had been replaced by someone healthy, smiling, confident. Katerina had gained weight, her skin had a healthy glow, her eyes were bright, and most notably, she looked peaceful, no longer glancing over her shoulder, no longer flinching at loud noises, no longer moving through the world as if expecting violence at any moment. "You look wonderful," Nicole told Katerina during one visit several months after the rescue. "You look so healthy and happy. I feel like I am alive for first time in 2 years," Katerina said. "When I was being trafficked, I was not really living. I was just surviving, just trying to get through each day without being hurt too badly. But now I am actually living. I am learning, growing, making friends, dreaming about my future. I never thought I would have future. Now I have whole life ahead of me."
Nicole's role in rescuing 23 trafficking victims attracted significant media attention. Local news stations covered the story extensively, interviewing Nicole about how she'd noticed the suspicious pattern and contacted authorities. The coverage praised Nicole as a hero, an ordinary person who'd paid attention and acted on her concerns, making an extraordinary difference. But Nicole was uncomfortable with the hero label. "I just did what anyone should do," she told reporters. "I saw something that didn't seem right, and I reported it. That's not heroic. That's just basic human decency and community responsibility. The real heroes are the women who survived trafficking and found the courage to testify against their traffickers. The real heroes are the FBI agents who planned and executed the rescue operation. The real heroes are the victim advocates and counselors who help survivors rebuild their lives. I just noticed a pattern and made a phone call." Despite her modesty, Nicole's actions inspired changes at Kroger and throughout the retail industry. The grocery chain implemented enhanced training for all employees on recognizing signs of human trafficking. The training taught workers to watch for red flags, including customers making repetitive purchases of high-value items, customers who appeared frightened or controlled, customers with visible injuries, customers who paid in small bills, and unusual purchasing patterns that didn't match normal consumer behavior. The training emphasized that employees should report concerns to management and appropriate hotlines rather than confronting suspected traffickers directly, as confrontation could endanger victims and alert traffickers to surveillance. It provided specific contact information for the National Human Trafficking Hotline 11888 and encouraged employees to trust their instincts when something seemed wrong. Nicole became involved in delivering this training, speaking at corporate sessions and individual stores about her experience with Katerina. She explained the specific warning signs she'd noticed: the exclusive purchase of formula without any other baby items, the repetitive pattern over weeks, the cash payments, the frightened demeanor, the visible bruises. She emphasized that trafficking victims were often hidden in plain sight, forced to move through public spaces while their captivity went unnoticed because people assumed someone else would help, or that it wasn't their business to get involved. "Trafficking victims are counting on us to notice," Nicole told training attendees. "They're often too controlled or too frightened to ask for help directly. Their traffickers monitor them, threaten them, isolate them, but they still have to appear in public sometimes, to work, to make purchases, to perform tasks for their traffickers. Those public appearances are opportunities for intervention, but only if people are paying attention and willing to act on what they see." Nicole's training reached thousands of retail workers across Colorado and eventually expanded nationally as Kroger rolled out the program to all stores. Other retailers, Walmart, Target, Safeway, CVS, Walgreens, developed similar training programs, recognizing that their employees were positioned to identify trafficking victims during routine commercial transactions. Over the next 2 years, these training programs led to dozens of documented cases where retail employees noticed suspicious patterns and reported them, resulting in trafficking investigations and victim rescues. A CVS pharmacist in Texas noticed a young woman filling prescriptions for multiple people using different insurance cards and recognized it as a possible trafficking scenario. Investigation revealed the woman was being trafficked and forced to obtain prescription medications for resale. A Walmart cashier in Florida noticed a teenage girl buying prepaid phone cards repeatedly while accompanied by an older man who watched her closely. The cashier's report led to rescue of the girl who was a runaway being sex trafficked. A Target employee in Illinois noticed a man purchasing large quantities of gift cards using different credit cards and recognized it as a money laundering pattern associated with trafficking. Investigation exposed a trafficking ring that had victimized 17 women. Each of these interventions traced back to the awareness and training that Nicole's experience with Katerina had helped generate. Her observation of a woman buying baby formula had created ripples that extended far beyond one trafficking case in Denver, transforming how retail workers across the country understood their role in identifying and reporting human trafficking. Nicole remained a cashier at Kroger, but her work now carried a deeper sense of purpose. She wasn't just scanning groceries. She was watching for people who might need help, paying attention to patterns that others might miss, serving as a set of observant eyes in the community. She trained new employees on what to watch for. She maintained contact with local FBI agents and victim advocates. She continued speaking at training sessions and community events about recognizing trafficking. She also maintained her friendship with Katerina, watching with pride as the young woman who'd once been so broken and hopeless rebuilt her life with remarkable resilience. Katerina completed her associate degree in social work and was accepted into a bachelor's program at the University of Colorado, Denver. She worked part-time at a non-profit organization that provided services to trafficking survivors, using her lived experience to help others navigate recovery. She eventually became a US permanent resident, putting her on a path towards citizenship. I want to become US citizen and work helping trafficking survivors for rest of my life, Katerina told Nicole during one of their coffee meetups 3 years after the rescue. What happened to me was terrible, but I am using it for good. Every survivor I help is proof that traffickers did not destroy me. They tried, but I am still here, and I am strong. You survived 14 months of hell. You found the courage to whisper that you needed help, even though you were terrified. You testified against your traffickers, even though it meant reliving your trauma. That's incredible strength. Katerina nodded thoughtfully. Maybe, but I also think about how close I came to never being rescued. If you had not noticed me, if you had not asked questions, if you had decided it was not your business, I would still be captive. Maybe I would be dead by now. Many trafficking victims die because no one notices them. I was lucky that you noticed. It wasn't luck, Nicole said. It was patterns. You came in 13 times over 6 weeks buying the same thing, looking the same way, showing the same signs of distress. Patterns are meant to be noticed. That's why traffickers rely on people not paying attention, not connecting dots, not trusting their instincts. I just refused to ignore what the pattern was telling me. 5 years after Nicole first noticed Katerina buying baby formula, she was invited to speak at a national conference on combating human trafficking in Washington, D.C. The conference brought together law enforcement, federal agencies, non-profit organizations, survivors, and private sector representatives to discuss strategies for identifying trafficking and supporting survivors. Nicole's presentation, titled Trafficking in Plain Sight, How a Grocery Store Cashier Recognized and Reported a Victim, drew one of the largest audiences at the conference. She walked attendees through the 6 weeks of observations that had led to her initial report, the conversation with Katerina that confirmed trafficking, the coordination with FBI that resulted in the rescue operation, and the subsequent recovery journeys of the 23 victims. The key lesson from my experience is that trafficking victims are often visible in public spaces, but go unnoticed because we're not paying attention, or we don't know what warning signs to look for, Nicole told the audience. Katerina came into my store 13 times. Other customers saw her, other employees saw her, but I was the only one who noticed that something was wrong, and that was only because I was paying attention to patterns over time, rather than just processing individual transactions. Nicole described the specific warning signs she'd observed: exclusive purchase of one expensive item repeatedly, cash payments, frightened demeanor, visible injuries, deteriorating physical condition, inability to engage in normal social interaction. She explained how she'd researched baby formula theft and resale operations, and learned about the connection to trafficking. She emphasized the importance of reporting to proper authorities, rather than confronting suspected traffickers directly. I'm not a law enforcement officer, or a social worker, or a trafficking expert, Nicole said. I'm a grocery store cashier. But I was in a position to notice something wrong, and I had the resources to report it to people who could investigate and intervene. Every person in this room works with vulnerable populations, or has contact with the public. You're all in positions where you might observe trafficking. The question is whether you'll pay attention and act when you see warning signs. During the Q&A session, an audience member asked, how do we balance respecting people's privacy and not making assumptions about them versus being vigilant for signs of trafficking? How do we avoid profiling while still watching for warning signs? Nicole addressed the question thoughtfully. That's a valid concern. You don't want to profile people or make assumptions based on appearance or ethnicity. What I focused on was behavior and patterns, not identity. Katerina could have been anyone, any age, any ethnicity, any background. What made me suspicious was the pattern of her purchases over time, combined with her frightened demeanor and visible injuries. Those were objective warning signs that something was wrong, not assumptions based on who she was. I think the key is to watch for concerning behaviors, fear, injuries, repetitive unusual purchases, signs of being controlled, regardless of who is exhibiting those behaviors. Another audience member, a survivor advocate, asked, what would you say to trafficking survivors who feel invisible, who feel like no one notices or cares about their situation? Nicole thought about Katerina's testimony, that she'd felt hopeless, believing no one would ever notice or help her. I would say that people do notice, maybe not everyone, maybe not immediately, but someone is paying attention, someone sees you, someone cares. Katerina thought she was invisible, but I saw her, and once I saw her, I couldn't unsee her, I couldn't ignore her suffering, or pretend it wasn't happening. I had to act. There are people in every community who are paying attention, who are willing to help. Don't give up hope that someone will notice. Keep looking for opportunities to signal that you need help, because someone is watching.
After her presentation, Nicole was approached by numerous conference attendees, law enforcement officers, victim advocates, survivors, corporate security personnel, all wanting to thank her for sharing her story and ask questions about implementing similar vigilance in their contexts. A woman introduced herself as Rachel Thompson, director of a national anti-trafficking organization. Nicole, your story is exactly what we need more people to hear. Trafficking often happens in plain sight, but goes unnoticed because people don't know what to look for, or they assume someone else will handle it. We'd like to work with you to develop a public awareness campaign using your story to teach people how to recognize and report trafficking. Would you be interested?" Nicole agreed, and over the following year she worked with the organization to create educational materials that were distributed to businesses, schools, community organizations, and the general public. The materials used Katerina's case as a detailed example of how trafficking can be hidden in routine commercial transactions and how observant community members can recognize warning signs and report to authorities. The campaign included posters displayed in retail stores, grocery stores, pharmacies and gas stations showing warning signs of trafficking and providing hotline numbers. It included training videos for employees in customer-facing industries, teaching them to recognize suspicious patterns. It included social media content, educating the public about what trafficking looks like and how to help. And it included Nicole and Katerina appearing together in a short documentary explaining the case from both perspectives, the observer who noticed and the survivor who was saved. The documentary was particularly powerful because it showed the progression of the case from both viewpoints. Nicole described noticing the suspicious pattern, researching what it might mean, deciding to speak to Katerina, coordinating with FBI. Katerina described her experience of being trafficked, feeling hopeless and invisible, being shocked when Nicole asked if she actually had a baby, feeling hope for the first time in months when Nicole said she would help, the terror and relief when FBI raided the warehouse and freed all the victims. "I thought I would die in that warehouse," Katerina said in the documentary. "I thought no one would ever rescue us because no one knew we existed, but Nicole knew. She saw me when I thought I was invisible. She asked questions when she could have ignored me. She called for help when she could have decided it was not her problem. Because one grocery store cashier paid attention and cared, 23 women were freed from trafficking. That is the power of paying attention." The documentary and awareness campaign reached millions of people, generating widespread discussion about human trafficking and community responsibility for identifying and helping victims. It led to increased calls to the National Human Trafficking Hotline, suggesting that more people were recognizing potential trafficking situations and reporting them. It contributed to additional training requirements in several states, mandating that employees in certain industries receive trafficking awareness education. Most importantly, it led to additional trafficking victims being identified and rescued. In the 2 years following the campaign's launch, there were 47 documented cases across the United States where someone recognized trafficking warning signs they'd learned about through the campaign and reported to authorities, resulting in investigations that freed trafficking victims. A hotel clerk in Georgia noticed a man checking in with a teenage girl who appeared drugged and disoriented, remembered the warning signs from the campaign, and called police. The girl was a trafficking victim being transported for prostitution. A bus driver in California noticed a young woman with bruises and fresh injuries who seemed terrified of the man she was traveling with, recalled the campaign's message about trusting your instincts, and reported to authorities. Investigation revealed an interstate trafficking operation. A librarian in Ohio noticed a woman using library computers to repeatedly access the same websites that sold high-value goods online, recognized it as a potential resale pattern associated with trafficking, and reported her concerns. The woman was being trafficked and forced to run online resale operations for stolen goods. Each of these interventions and dozens more were ripples from Nicole's decision to pay attention to a frightened woman buying baby formula 5 years earlier. Her observation had rescued 23 victims directly and contributed to systems and awareness that would protect countless others. 10 years after Nicole first noticed Katerina, she reflected on how one moment of observation had transformed her understanding of her role in the world. She was still a cashier at Kroger, still scanning groceries and serving customers, still working for $19.50 an hour after receiving regular raises over the years. She'd never pursued a higher-paying career or a more prestigious job. She remained working class, living paycheck to paycheck, raising her daughter as a single mother in a modest apartment. But Nicole's work had meaning that transcended paychecks and career advancement. She was part of a community safety network, someone who paid attention to vulnerable people, someone who took responsibility for noticing when something was wrong and acting on that knowledge. She'd saved 23 lives. She'd helped change industry practices nationwide. She'd inspired thousands of people to be more observant and willing to help. And she'd maintained a deep friendship with Katerina, watching the young woman transform from a broken trafficking victim into a thriving advocate and counselor. Katerina, now 34 years old, had completed her bachelor's degree in social work and was pursuing a master's degree while working full-time at a non-profit organization serving trafficking survivors. She'd become a US citizen, she'd rebuilt relationships with her family in Ukraine through regular video calls. She'd found an apartment she loved, developed a circle of close friends, and was dating someone kind and supportive. She'd traveled, pursued hobbies, volunteered in her community, and built the kind of normal, peaceful life she'd thought was impossible during those 14 months of captivity. 10 years ago, I was trapped in a warehouse being trafficked, Katerina said during a joint interview with Nicole for a 10-year anniversary article about the case. I thought I would never escape, that I would die there or be moved to another city to continue being exploited. I felt invisible and hopeless. Then Nicole noticed me. One cashier at one grocery store paid attention to a pattern others missed and cared enough to act. That observation changed my life and the lives of 22 other women. It changed how retail workers are trained to recognize trafficking. It changed how communities think about responsibility for vulnerable people. All of that started because Nicole refused to ignore what seemed wrong. Nicole, characteristically humble, redirected the focus. Katerina survived something unimaginable and used that experience to help hundreds of other survivors. That's the real story. Not that I noticed something, but that Katerina survived and transformed her trauma into a mission to help others. I just happened to be paying attention at the right moment. Katerina is the one who's been doing the hard work of healing and advocacy for 10 years. But the truth was that both women had played crucial roles in a story that had expanded far beyond one trafficking case. Nicole had noticed and acted. Katerina had survived and thrived. Together they'd created awareness and change that would protect vulnerable people for generations. Their story was taught in law enforcement training, social work programs, business schools and community organizations as an example of how ordinary people in everyday situations could recognize and interrupt extraordinary crimes. The 23 women rescued in that warehouse raid 10 years ago had all gone on to rebuild their lives in various ways. Some had returned to their home countries, others had stayed in the United States obtaining permanent residency or citizenship. Several had completed education and found careers. A few had married and started families. All carried the trauma of trafficking, but also carried the resilience that had allowed them to survive and the determination to build lives their traffickers had tried to destroy. And all of them remembered Nicole, the grocery store cashier, who'd noticed when they'd felt invisible, who'd cared when they'd thought no one cared, who'd acted when action had seemed impossible. Nicole had given them back their freedom, their safety, their futures. That gift could never be repaid, but it could be honored through the lives they built and the people they helped in turn. Nicole continued working her register at Kroger, scanning groceries, serving customers, paying attention. She watched for patterns that might indicate someone needed help. She trained new employees on warning signs of trafficking. She maintained her relationship with FBI agents and victim advocates. She spoke at conferences and trainings when asked. She stayed connected with Katerina and several of the other women who'd been rescued, and every time she scanned baby formula for a customer, which happened regularly, as it was a common purchase, Nicole remembered those 6 weeks 10 years ago when she'd noticed that something was wrong with a woman who bought formula but had no baby. She remembered Katerina's frightened face and trembling hands. She remembered the moment Katerina had whispered, "I don't have a baby," and Nicole had understood she was looking at a trafficking victim. That moment had changed everything. For Katerina, for 22 other victims, for retail workers who now received training on recognizing trafficking, for communities that understood they had responsibility to watch for vulnerable people, for countless future victims who would be identified and helped because someone noticed a pattern and acted. One grocery store cashier, one woman buying baby formula, one decision to pay attention and ask questions, 10 years of ripples spreading outward, creating change, saving lives. That was always enough, more than enough.
Thank you very much for listening. Please let us know what you think of this story in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any other videos.